What if I told you there was a real-life case so disturbing it would keep Stephen King awake at night? Imagine a secluded farmhouse in Bavaria, snow blanketing everything around, and an entire family brutally murdered by someone who had been secretly living in their home for weeks. The most chilling thing? The footprints in the snow that led to the house ... but never left. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck, a mystery that has remained unsolved for over 100 years. And once you hear all the details, you'll understand why. Some investigators believe that more than just one human killer was responsible for this carnage. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will forever change the way you view old houses and strange noises at night. But before we dive into this real nightmare, click the subscribe button now and activate the bell, because you'll want to follow ILL of our investigation into history's darkest mysteries. And trust me, after this story, you'll need company to sleep at night. Let's go. It was March 1922. Germany was still recovering from the devastation of World War I. Amidst the economic and social chaos, there existed a place that seemed forgotten by time: the Hinterkaifeck farm, located about 70 kilometers from Munich. The name itself was ominous. Hinterkaifeck literally means behind Kaifeck, a reference to its secluded location, hidden behind the small village of Kaifeck. It was as if the property had been deliberately built to be hidden from prying eyes. The farm was inhabited by the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, 63, a stubborn and difficult-tempered farmer. His wife, Cecilia, 72. Their widowed daughter, Victoria. Gabriel, 35. And Victoria's two children, Cecilia, 7, and Joseph, just 2. Completing the group was the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, 44, who had arrived just hours before her death. But here's the first disturbing detail. Maria was the new maid. The previous one, a woman named Crescentia Rieger, had quit 6 months earlier, claiming the farm was haunted. She spoke of strange noises coming from the attic, objects moving in the night, and a constant feeling of being watched. Andreas Gruber had scoffed at these superstitions. How he would regret that move. The events leading up to the massacre are as disturbing as the crime itself. And herein lies one of the most terrifying parts of this story. All the signs were there. The Gruber family knew something was wrong. They just didn't imagine how wrong things were about to get. Let's start with the newspaper. A few days before the murders, Andreas discovered someone was reading his daily paper. Every morning, he would find the paper in a different position than where he'd left it the night before. The pages were folded oddly, as if someone had read it in a hurry and replaced it haphazardly. But who could be doing this? The farm was isolated, and the nearest neighbors lived miles away. Then came the noises. For several nights in a row, the entire family reported hearing heavy footsteps coming from the attic. These weren't the typical sounds of an old house settling. And they were deliberate, rhythmic steps, as if someone were pacing back and forth. Andreas, being a practical man, decided to investigate. He climbed into the attic several times, flashlight in hand, searching for rats, possums, or any logical explanation. He found only cobwebs and dust-covered old furniture. But each night, the footsteps returned, and then came the most frightening incident of all. A few days before the massacre, Andreas went out for his morning rounds of the property, as was his custom. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering the grounds with a pristine white blanket. It was the kind of snow that records every step, every movement. That's when he saw it, footprints in the snow. But these were no ordinary footprints. The trail began in the forest surrounding the property and led directly to the house. Each print was perfectly defined in the ice, showing that someone had walked there during the early hours of the morning. Andreas followed the tracks, his heart pounding. The tracks led to the back door of the farm. and simply stopped. There were no footprints leading away from the property. No signs indicating that the person had left. It was as if whoever had made those footprints had simply disappeared. Andreas examined every inch of the house. He looked for other exits, other traces. Nothing. The person who had arrived during the night was still there, somewhere. But where? Here's a detail that will make your blood run cold. The tool used in the murders had been missing from the farm itself for weeks. A pickaxe. A common farm tool used for breaking ice and hard earth. Andreas had noticed it missing a few weeks earlier, but didn't think much of it. Tools were lost, borrowed, and sometimes stolen by neighbors. It was part of rural life, but now we know the truth. Someone had picked up that pickaxe weeks before the murders. Someone who knew the property well enough to know where the tools were kept. Someone who had time to plan, to choose the perfect weapon. Someone who may have been secretly living on the farm all this time. The pickaxe was found at the crime scene, covered in blood and hair. Investigators would later determine that it had been used with brutal force, each blow calculated to kill instantly. But the most disturbing thing is wondering where this pickaxe was hidden all these weeks. In the attic, where the noises were coming from? In some dark corner of the property where the killer patiently waited for his opportunity? March 31st, 1922. A Friday. What happened that night was so brutal, so systematically planned, that even today criminologists study the case trying to understand the mind behind such violence. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, had arrived that morning. She came from a domestic employment agency, recommended as a reliable and discreet worker. Maria had no idea she was walking into a death trap. She didn't know about the strange noises, the footprints in the snow, or the sense of dread that had settled over the Hinterkaifeck farm. The evening routine began normally. Dinner was served, the children were put to bed, and the adults chatted briefly before retiring to their rooms. Outside, the snow continued to fall, further isolating the property from the outside world. But someone was watching, waiting, counting the minutes, until everyone was vulnerable. The first target was Andreas Gruber. Around 11 p.m., Andreas went to the stable for a final check on the animals, as he did every night. He was a man of rigid, predictable routines. The killer knew these habits. Andreas never returned home. His body was found in the stable, brutally beaten to death with a pickaxe. The injuries were so severe that parts of his skull were completely shattered. There were no signs of a struggle. The first blow had been fatal, striking him in the back while he was tending the animals. But the killer didn't stop there. Andreas's wife, Cecilia, must have been surprised by her husband's delay. Around midnight, she left the house looking for him. Perhaps she screamed his name in the darkness. Perhaps she felt a shiver of terror as she realized something was terribly wrong. She was attacked in the courtyard, between the house and the stable. Her screams were muffled by the snow and the distance from the nearest neighbors. Like her husband, she died instantly. Now people came into the house. Victoria Gabriel, the widowed daughter, must have heard a noise. Perhaps she realized her parents weren't coming back. Bravely, or perhaps in panic, she opened the front door to investigate. It was the last mistake of his life. The killer was waiting. Victoria was brutally beaten on the doorstep, her blood staining the entrance to the house that should have been her refuge. Only the children and the maid remained. Maria Baumgartner, on her first day of work, was found dead in her room. Investigators determined she had been murdered in her sleep, a small mercy amidst such brutality. But the most shocking thing was yet to come. The two children, 7-year-old Cecilia and just 2-year-old Joseph, were found in the same bed, cuddling each other. Evidence suggests that Cecilia, the older sister, tried to protect her little brother until the very end. Both were killed with pickaxes. Here's the detail that will haunt you. Investigators discovered that little Cecilia had pulled out several clumps of her own hair before she died. The strands were found in her clenched hands. She was terrified, aware of what was happening, and fighting until the end. But wait, the story gets even more disturbing. When the bodies were discovered, investigators made a shocking discovery. The deaths did not all occur on the same night. Forensic evidence indicated that some victims died on Friday, but others may have died on Saturday or even Sunday. This means the killer remained on the property for days after the first murders. He didn't flee immediately. He didn't panic. He remained there, calmly, perhaps finishing what he had started. During this time, he may have used the kitchen, slept in the beds, and walked the hallways where the bodies of his victims lay. The psychopathy required for such behavior goes beyond normal comprehension. But this raises an even more terrifying question. What was he doing during those days? Why didn't he flee immediately? Was he looking for something specific? Or did he simply enjoy being there? April 4th, 1922. Tuesday. It had been several days since anyone had seen the Gruber family. Neighbors, though distant, began to notice the lack of signs of life on the farm. No smoke coming from the chimney, no movement in the yard, the animals mooing with hunger in the stable. A group of neighbors decided to investigate. When they arrived at the property, they found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Bodies were scattered throughout the farm, some inside the house, others in the yard and stable. A state of decomposition confirmed that the murders had occurred days earlier. But there was something even more disturbing. Clear signs that someone had been on the property after the murders. The kitchen had been recently used. Dishes were clean and organized. Fresh food had been prepared and eaten. The wood in the fireplace was still warm. Beds were unmade, as if someone had slept in them. Killer had turned the Hinterkaifeck farm into his private home, using it freely, while the bodies of his victims rotted around him. The Bavarian police treated the case with all the seriousness a quintuplet homicide deserved. More than 100 people were questioned. Dozens of suspects were investigated. Theories were formulated and discarded. But from the beginning, the investigation was marked by incompetence and contamination of evidence. First, the neighbors who discovered the bodies walked all over the property before the police arrived, destroying any potential footprints and clues. Second, investigators at the time lacked access to modern forensic techniques. Third, the media turned the case into a circus, with journalists swarming the property in search of sensational stories. Still, some intriguing clues have emerged. The house's locks had not been forced. This suggested the killer had access to the keys or knew another way in. Several theories were considered. A former farm employee, a secret lover of Victoria's, or a burglar who knew the family. But no theory has been able to explain all the bizarre aspects of the case. Why did the killer remain on the property for days? Why did he kill even the small children who posed no threat? How did he manage to move so silently through the farm that no one heard screams or sounds of struggle? And more importantly, how did he simply disappear without a trace? Over the course of 100 years, investigators, criminologists, and crime buffs have proposed numerous theories about the Hinterkaifeck killer. Let's examine the main ones. Some investigators suspected Lawrence Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had a complicated relationship with the Gruber family. Schlittenbauer had been romantically involved with Victoria Gabriel, and many believed he was little Joseph's real father. The theory suggested that Schlittenbauer killed the family in a fit of jealousy, or to conceal the scandal of his paternity. He knew the property, had easy access, and was aware of the family's habits. But there were problems with this theory. Schlittenbauer had a solid alibi for the night of the murders. confirmed by several independent witnesses. Furthermore, he was one of the people who discovered the bodies, and his shocked reaction seemed genuine. Another line of investigation focused on former farm employees who may have harbored a grudge against the family. Andreas Gruber was known for being a difficult, demanding, and sometimes cruel boss. One name that emerged was that of a seasonal worker who had been humiliatingly fired a few months before the murders. Witnesses reported that he had made threats against Andreas, vowing that one day he would settle the score. But when the police located him, they discovered that he was working in another city at the time of the crimes, with dozens of witnesses to prove it. This theory gained traction, considering the historical context. Germany in 1922 was still dealing with post-war chaos. Many soldiers had deserted and were living as fugitives in the forests. Some developed severe psychological disorders due to the trauma of battle. The theory suggested that a psychotic deserter had hidden himself at the Hinterkaifeck farm, secretly living in the attic or some other hiding place on the property. The strange noises the family heard were evidence of his presence. In a night of rage or paranoia, he would have attacked the entire family. This theory would explain many bizarre aspects of the case. How the killer knew the property so well, why he remained there for days, and how he managed to disappear into the woods without a trace. Theory 4. Incest and REV in Jeep. Perhaps the most sinister theory suggests that Andreas Gruber had an incestuous relationship with his daughter Victoria, and that little Joseph was the product of this forbidden relationship. When Victoria threatened to expose the secret, Andreas allegedly killed his entire family to protect his reputation, then committed suicide. But this theory did not explain the absence of Andreas's body, or the signs that someone had remained on the property after the murders. Some investigators have speculated the involvement of obscure cults, the brutality of the murders, the fact that an entire family was wiped out, and certain symbols found on the property have raised suspicions of satanic rituals. But police quickly dismissed that line of investigation due to a lack of concrete evidence. And so we come to the theory that haunts the Bavarian region to this day, the possibility that the Hinterkaifeck killer was not entirely human. This theory gained traction due to unexplained aspects of the case that no rational investigation has been able to resolve. First, how could someone have lived hidden on the property for weeks without being detected? The farm wasn't large enough to hide an adult, and Andreas Gruber was an observant man who knew every corner of his property. Second, how did the killer manage to kill 6 people without any of them screaming or making enough noise to alert the others? Even considering the farm's isolation, it was impossible for all the deaths to have been completely silent. Third, the footprints in the snow that led to the house but did not leave remained a mystery. No rational explanation was found for this phenomenon. Fourth, several neighbors reported strange sightings in the area in the weeks before the murders. Lights flickering in the woods at night, shadowy figures walking among the trees, animalistic sounds that didn't correspond to any local fauna. Locals began to whisper about a demonic presence that had taken up residence on the farm. Some older people recalled ancient legends about vengeful spirits that haunted the area, waiting for the opportunity to collect blood debts. Of course, the police dismissed these superstitions as mass hysteria. But to this day, many Bavarians believe that something beyond human comprehension was responsible for the Hinterkaifeck Massacre. Even after 100 years, there are aspects of the case that defy any logical explanation. The missing Andreas Gruber was known for keeping a considerable amount of cash hidden in his home, a common practice among farmers wary of banks at the time. After the murders, this money simply disappeared. But if the motive was robbery, why did the killer wait days to collect the money? And why didn't he take other valuables scattered around the house? The food Sion assumed during the days he remained on the property, the killer apparently ate normally, preparing meals in the kitchen as if he were the owner of the house. What kind of psychopath has the appetite to eat surrounded by rotting corpses? A-Nils. Interestingly, all the farm animals remained alive and relatively well cared for even after the murders. Someone continued to feed the cattle, chickens, and pigs during the days while the bodies rotted. This suggests a level of coldness and mental organization that goes beyond a crime of passion. The keys to the farm were never found. Did the killer gain access to the property? Did he have his own keys? Or did he pick the lock so skillfully that he left no marks? The absence of Balo considering the brutality of the pickaxe attacks, it was expected that there would be much. More blood splattered across the property. Some areas appeared to have been methodically cleaned. Why would the killer go to the trouble of cleaning up the blood, but leave the bodies to rot? The Hinterkaifeck Massacre left deep scars on the region. The farm was demolished a few years later because no one wanted to buy or live there. The land remained abandoned for decades. Several families living nearby moved away, unable to bear the constant sense of fear that gripped the area. Children refused to play outside alone. Adults avoided leaving their homes after dark. The German media turned the case into a national sensation, with newspapers publishing increasingly bizarre and sensational theories. The case influenced works of fiction, horror films, and urban legends that persist to this day. But perhaps the most lasting impact was on the trust of rural communities. The idea that an entire family could be murdered in their own home, in what should be the safest place in the world, profoundly shook people's sense of security. Over the past few decades, several groups of investigators have attempted to solve the Hinterkaifeck mystery using modern forensic techniques. In 2007, a group of criminology students at the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy decided to re-examine the case as an academic project. They applied methods of modern criminal profiling, evidence analysis, and crime scene reconstruction. His conclusions were disturbing. The psychological profile they created suggested a highly organized, patient killer with intimate knowledge of the family's property and habits. Someone who planned the crimes meticulously and executed them with calculated coldness. But even with all the modern techniques, they were unable to identify a definitive suspect. In 2009, German researchers attempted to use DNA analysis on preserved evidence from the original case. Unfortunately, natural degradation and contamination of the samples made it impossible to extract usable genetic profiles. As with all great mysteries, the Hinterkaifeck case has spawned its share of conspiracy theories. Some believe the German government covered up the truth to prevent panic. This theory suggests the killer was a foreign agent or a military experiment gone wrong. Others suggest the involvement of secret societies or occult cults operating in post-war Germany. There are even those who propose extraterrestrial explanations, considering the inexplicable aspects of the case. While these theories are fascinating, there is no credible evidence to support them. The Hinterkaifeck Massacre has inspired countless works of fiction, documentaries, and journalistic investigations. The case is often cited as one of the most disturbing unsolved crimes in world history. Horror writers used the case as the basis for stories about haunted farms and supernatural killers. Filmmakers created films exploring theories about satanic cults and vengeful spirits. The farm became a destination for morbid tourists and ghost hunters, even though it no longer exists. The site where the property once stood still attracts curious visitors, especially on the anniversaries of the murders. After examining all the evidence, theories, and investigations, what is the most likely explanation for the Hinterkaifeck Massacre? The theory most widely accepted by modern criminologists is a combination of elements. A human killer, likely someone with knowledge of the farm. who suffered from severe psychological disorders and meticulously planned the crimes. This individual may have been a former farm employee, a military deserter hiding in the area, or even a member of the community itself who developed a pathological obsession with the Gruber family. The killer likely hid on or near the property for weeks, observing the family's habits and waiting for the perfect opportunity. The noises in the attic, the footprints in the snow, and the disturbed newspaper were all evidence of his presence. On the night of the murders, he coldly executed his plan, systematically eliminating each family member. He remained on the property for several days, possibly searching for money or valuables, before disappearing forever. But this rational explanation still leaves many unanswered questions. How did he manage to hide so effectively? Why hasn't anyone else in the area disappeared or been seen behaving suspiciously? Where did he go after leaving the farm? 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck Massacre remains a disturbing reminder that some mysteries may never be solved. It's a case that challenges our basic human needs for understanding and closure. History reminds us that evil can exist in forms our rational mind refuses to accept, that there are human predators capable of levels of cruelty and callousness beyond our normal comprehension. But it also reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of paying attention to the danger signs around us. The Gruber family had numerous warnings that something was wrong. The noises, the footprints, the disturbed newspaper. Had they taken these signs more seriously, sought help, or temporarily left the farm, perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided. The Hinterkaifeck case resonates even more strongly in our age of security cameras, alarm systems, and instant communication. It's hard to imagine how someone could hide on a property for weeks today without being detected. But this makes the mystery even more fascinating. How is this possible in an age where technology was primitive and communication limited? What kind of individual possessed the skills and composure necessary to carry out such elaborate crimes? And if this same type of predator exists today, what methods would it use to hunt its victims in our connected world? There are practical lessons we can learn from the Hinterkaifeck tragedy. First lesson, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. The Gruber family had several warning signs, but chose to ignore them. Second lesson, seek help when necessary. Pride and stubbornness can be fatal. If Andreas Gruber had contacted the police about the strange noises and footprints in the snow, the tragedy could have been avoided. Third lesson, maintain community connections. The isolation of the Hinterkaifeck farm was a crucial factor in allowing the killer to operate freely. Close neighbors and regular communication may be your best defenses. Fourth lesson, vary your routines. Andreas Gruber had very predictable habits, which made the killer's job easier. Small changes to your routine can make you a less attractive target. And now we come to the question that has plagued investigators for a century. Who was the Hinterkaifeck killer? Was it a jealous neighbor who eliminated the family to hide their secrets? Was it a vengeful former employee who returned to settle a score? Was it a psychotic military deserter hiding in the woods? Was it a family member who went mad? Or was it something more sinister, a supernatural presence that feeds on human fear and violence? The truth is, we may never know. And perhaps that's for the best. Some mysteries are most powerful when they remain unsolved, when our imagination can fill in the gaps with possibilities, far more terrifying than any reality. What we know for sure is that evil visited the Hinterkaifeck farm that March night in a night 1922, and it left scars that echo through the centuries, reminding us that there are forces in the darkness that our civilized minds prefer not to contemplate. But wait, there's more. During the initial investigation, several crucial pieces of evidence simply disappeared. Victor I.A. Gabriel's diary, which could have contained clues about secret relationships or threats she received, has never been found. Neighbors confirmed that she kept a diary religiously, writing in it every night before bed. Where was this diary on the night of the murders? Even more intriguing, crime scene photographs taken by early investigators also disappeared from police files. These images could have revealed crucial details that eyewitnesses may have forgotten or distorted over time. And there is one piece of evidence that was deliberately destroyed. The victim's clothes were burned on the orders of the police chief, supposedly for sanitary reasons. But modern analysis of these clothes could have revealed the killer's DNA, blood patterns indicating the sequence of attacks, or even fabric fibers leading to the perpetrator. Why did this crucial evidence disappear? Investigative incompetence? Or was someone interested in keeping certain secrets buried forever? As the years passed, dark secrets about the Gruber family began to surface. And these secrets may have been the real motive behind the massacre. Victoria Gabriel, the widowed daughter, was not exactly the respectable woman she appeared to be. Further investigation revealed that she had relationships with several local men simultaneously. Little Joseph's father remained a mystery. She had given 3 different names to different men when questioned. Even more disturbing, there were persistent rumors that Andreas Gruber sexually abused his own daughter. While never proven, these rumors were cited by several independent sources during the investigation. If these rumors were true, it would open up a whole new set of motives. Victoria may have threatened to expose her father. One of Victoria's lovers may have discovered the incest and decided to take justice into their own hands. Or Andreas himself may have gone mad under the weight of guilt and decided to eliminate his entire family before killing himself. But this theory still doesn't explain how Andreas could have killed himself after murdering the others, since his body was never found at the crime scene in the same way as the other victims. In 1998, a German researcher named Franz Xaver Egger made a discovery that completely changed the perspective on the Hinterkaifeck case. Researching local church archives, Egger discovered that the area where the farm stood had, centuries before, been the site of public executions. During the Middle Ages, criminals were taken to that exact spot to be hanged or beheaded. Even more shocking, ancient records indicated that an entire family had been executed there in 1647, accused of witchcraft and demonic pacts. The names? The Gruber family, direct ancestors of the victims of the 1922 massacre. The discovery fueled supernatural theories about a family curse that manifested centuries later. Some paranormal researchers suggested that vengeful spirits had returned to collect an ancestral blood debt. Of course, skeptics pointed out that this coincidence could be just that, a coincidence. Many families shared surnames in the region, and medieval records were often inaccurate. But for those who believe in forces beyond human comprehension, this discovery was the final piece of the puzzle. From the 1950s onwards, strange reports began to emerge in the region where the former Hinterkaifeck farm stood. Drivers passing by at night reported seeing flashing lights at the abandoned site. Some stopped to investigate, but never found anything other than empty land and an oppressive sense of dread. One particularly credible witness was Father Heinrich Stolz, who had served the local church since 1947. In 1963, he reported seeing shadowy figures walking across the grounds during a full moon. When he approached to investigate, the figures simply vanished. There were 6 silhouettes, the priest wrote in his personal diary. 2 large, 2 smaller, 1 very small, and 1 that seemed to be carrying something in its hands. They walked in a line, as if they were being carried somewhere. The priest never spoke publicly about the incident, but his diary was discovered after his death in 1989. Other residents in the area reported recurring nightmares involving a burning farm and children's screams in the wind. Some would wake in the middle of the night with the distinct sensation that someone had whispered their names. In 2015, a retired former detective named Klaus Brenner came up with a final theory that may explain all the bizarre aspects of the Hinterkaifeck case. According to Brenner, the killer was Hermann Gans, a veterinarian who had worked in the region. During the years 1920 to 1922, Gans had anatomical knowledge that would explain the precision of the fatal blows. He was familiar with the local farms through his work. Most importantly, he disappeared from the region at the exact time of the murders. Brenner discovered that Gans had been fired from the Hinterkaifeck farm a few weeks before the crimes, following a violent argument with Andreas Gruber over the treatment of the animals. Later medical records indicated that Gans suffered from a progressive mental disorder that could have led to episodes of extreme violence. Brenner's theory explained many mysteries. How the killer managed to hide on the property. He knew every corner from his previous work. Why the animals were well cared for after the murders, professional instinct. And how he disappeared without a trace. He moved to another area using a false identity. But even this seemingly perfect theory had flaws. It didn't explain the footprints in the snow that didn't leave the property, nor the fact that Gans was seen in another town a few days after the murders. And so we come to the end of our journey through one of the most disturbing cases in world criminal history. 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck Massacre remains shrouded in mystery, defying our attempts at rational understanding. Perhaps the truth is a combination of several theories. Perhaps multiple factors converged on that fateful night in March 1922. Dark family secrets, a psychopathic killer, extraordinary circumstances, and yes, perhaps even forces our scientific mind refuses to accept. What we know for sure is that 6 innocent people, including 2 young children, lost their lives in a brutal and terrifying way. Their deaths left a void that echoes through the centuries, reminding us of the fragility of life and the constant presence of evil in our world. The Hinterkaifeck farm may have been demolished, but its legacy haunts the region to this day. Locals still avoid the area after dark. Children are educated about the dangers of venturing alone onto isolated properties. And investigators continue to try to solve a puzzle that may be impossible to solve. The Hinterkaifeck case teaches us several important lessons about human nature and the reality of evil in our world. First, evil rarely presents itself in the way we expect. It wasn't an obvious monster that attacked the Gruber family, but likely someone they knew, perhaps even trusted that second. Our human need for explanations cannot always be satisfied. Some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, forcing us to live with uncertainty and fear of the unknown. Third, human justice has its limitations. Even with all our modern technology and criminal expertise, there are still crimes that defy our ability to solve and punish. Fourth, the victims of unsolved crimes deserve to be remembered. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, little Cecilia, baby Joseph, and Maria Baumgartner were not just statistics in a police case. They were real people with dreams, fears, hopes, and lives that were brutally cut short. But our story doesn't have to end here. The Hinterkaifeck case remains technically open, and new evidence or investigative techniques could still emerge. If you're a detective, criminologist, researcher, or simply someone fascinated by unsolved mysteries, perhaps you could be the person who finally brings justice to the victims of Hinterkaifeck. Examine the evidence with fresh eyes. Question accepted theories. Look for connections that other investigators may have missed. Use modern technology to re-examine old leads. Keep the victims' memories alive by sharing their story. Educate others about the danger signs the Gruber family ignored. Support investigations of unsolved crimes in your own community. And most importantly, never stop asking questions. The truth may be hidden in some dusty archive, in the memory of a descendant, or in a connection yet to be discovered. The victims of Hinterkaifeck deserve justice. Even after 100 years, it's not too late to find answers. The story of Hinterkaifeck reminds us that we live in a world where mystery and terror walk side by side with beauty and hope. It is a world where evil can lurk in the shadows, patiently waiting for its opportunity to strike. But it is also a world where courageous people dedicate themselves to seeking the truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous that search may be. A world where the memory of victims can inspire others to fight for justice and the protection of the innocent. If this story touched you, if it sparked your curiosity about unsolved mysteries, if it made you question the shadows around you, then our mission was accomplished. Share this story with others. Keep the victim's memory alive, and never stop searching for answers, because somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be discovered. The Hinterkaifeck Massacre remains one of the greatest criminal mysteries of all time. But mysteries exist to be solved. And perhaps you are the person destined to finally bring light to this centuries-old darkness. The farm may be gone, but the search for the truth continues. And it will continue until the last question is answered and the last victim receives the justice they deserve. Until then, the shadows of Hinterkaifeck will remain with us, whispering their secrets in the wind, waiting for someone to finally hear their voices and tell their true story. So, do you have the courage to investigate more mysteries like this? If the story of Hinterkaifeck made your heart race, if you got that feeling that there is much more hidden in the shadows of history, then you need to subscribe to our channel right now. Why? Because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have dozens of even more disturbing cases, mysteries that will make you question everything you believe about reality.